Welcome to the Addendum, a thing added. On this podcast, Pastor Eric Williams will add to, clarify, and supplement the most recent teachings at Fellowship Renewed Church.
I'd like to start today by offering just some summaries on the temptations of Jesus. So we looked at the three temptations yesterday, and I offered a summary, a three-way summary of each of the temptations, and I just wanted to just offer those summaries here up front, just so that in the midst of the details, really what's happening in the midst of those summaries doesn't get lost. Okay, so here's number one. When Jesus is tempted by Satan, of course, that's the external temptation of Satan offering something. And so that's really the first thing I wanted to offer in all of these summaries was what that external temptation is, and just making that very clear. Remember that these were not internal temptations, that Jesus was being lured and enticed by his own desires to do something evil, to want something evil. But instead, these were temptations that were outside of him, that Satan was hoping that he could sway the internal temptations of Jesus, right, to desire that thing, but that never happened. Okay, so number one, what was the external temptation in this first temptation? Well, it was an immediate path to end the suffering of hunger for Jesus. So Satan says to Jesus, "Here are some stones. If you are the Son of God, I know something about you, and that is you have a power about you. And so, if you wanted to, you could just turn these stones or this stone into bread, and your hunger would be over. So, if you want to do that, go ahead and do that." Now, why would it have been sinful? What's the potential sin here? And it wasn't just in making food. It wasn't in using his power. That wouldn't have been sin. It wasn't in eating. That would have been sinful. So what exactly was the sin there? The sin would have been a lack of faith in his Father to provide, and it would have been a show of self-sufficiency. Unlike corporate Israel, Jesus didn't need to learn that man lives on bread alone, but he knew that. He knew that to be an absolute reality. And so for Jesus, very easy. He doesn't need to do that because he's not self-sufficient in that sense, that he is dependent upon the Father. And this display shows that. It shows the faith of Jesus. And then we have his response, of course. Jesus will trust in God's provision according to God's word, and it shows that he is absolutely dependent upon the Father. Okay, so that's temptation number one. Temptation number two, Satan offers Jesus an immediate pathway to power and authority without suffering. And so suffering seems to be a theme here, if you kind of pick up on that all the way through, that Jesus was to come as the suffering servant of God, and Jesus willingly gave himself to that end. He didn't do it begrudgingly. He didn't say, I don't like this path of suffering. Now, he did pray, "Lord, if it be possible, remove this cup from me, but not my will, but yours be done." And so Jesus was willingly giving his own life and accepting the will of God in his life, because what he desired was the redemption of humanity. So when Satan comes and he shows him all the kingdoms of the world in a moment's time, this is no temptation for Jesus, because as we discussed, all these things already belong to him. All the kingdoms of all the earth are his, and he is to be exalted upon his resurrection. He is to be exalted at the right hand of the Father, and he is given all authority in heaven and on earth. And so all authority in all places are given to him. And he is the one who brought all these things into existence to begin with. So it is for him and through him that all things exist. And that takes us back to that Colossians passage. But what's the potential for sin here? Of course, the potential for sin is worshiping Satan, because that was the contingency. If you will worship me, I'll give all these things to you. And of course, Jesus is faithful to the Father. He's committed to the Father. So Jesus will worship God alone, and he will trust in that is his Father's plans, according to his own word. So Jesus remains faithful in the midst of that second temptation. Temptation number 3, he's taken to the pinnacle of the temple, that is the high place at the temple, and Satan says, just throw yourself down from here, because don't you know, it says in the scriptures that if you are one who finds refuge in God, and if God has protection over you, if you are his, then don't worry about it. He will bear you up. He will keep anything from harming you. And so the external temptation here is a confirmation of God's love and a display of trust. So for everything that's occurring here in this situation, in all three temptations, I'm saying, is that it ultimately comes down to Jesus being faithful. It comes down to Jesus being a man of faith in the Father and his purposes and his word and his will. Jesus will not bend. Jesus will remain faithful to his Father. He is committed to his Father. And what's the potential even for sin here? The potential for sin, as Jesus says, is putting God to the test. And Jesus is unwilling to do that. And why is he unwilling? He doesn't desire to do that. He has no desire to put God to the test. And it's because he is faithful. It's because he's a man of faith. He believes. He doesn't need to put God to the test. He simply believes. He trusts. He knows already. So he's not going to sin and put God to the test. He doesn't need to do that. He's not tempted by that. So his faithful response then is that he will not put God to the test. He will remain faithful to God according to his word. He has faith in his Father. Okay, so that's just a quick summary of all the temptations, and maybe if we could just say it in a very simple way, this is putting the faith of Jesus to the test. Is he faithful? Is he the obedient son? Will he waver at all? And of course, the answer is no. He will not waver. He will remain faithful. All right, the second thing I wanted to just make a few comments on today is the God of this world and what that means. Now, there is a God of this world, and he is the only one true God, but that's not actually what this phrase is in reference to. It is lowercase g God, the God of this world. And who is that? And how could there be competing gods? Or is that what's happening? Is there a competition here? 1 John 5:18 and 19. We know that everyone who has been born of God does not keep on sinning, but he who is born of God protects him, and the evil one does not touch him. We know that we are from God, and the whole world lies in the power of the evil one. How does the whole world lie in the power of the evil one? Doesn't the whole world lie in the power of God himself? So that seems a bit contradictory to all of what we know from the rest of the scriptures. God did not hand over the entire course of the universe or even earth to Satan and say, here you go, you do what you want to do with it. That's not how it works. We know that's not how it works. We know that God is the God of this world. But what does that phrase mean? What does it mean that the whole world lies in the power of the evil one? Well, that's in 1 John 5. If we back up in 1 John, it helps. Context helps. 1 John 2:15 through 17 helps us understand what is meant by world. Now, the word world has lots of different definitions in our Bible. The context determines what kind of meaning world has. And when we read 1 John 2, it gives us the idea of this particular context. It says, beginning in verse 15 of chapter 2, do not love the world or the things in the world. If anyone loves the world, the love of the Father is not in him. For all that is in the world, the desires of the flesh, the desires of the eyes, and the pride of life is not from the Father, but is from the world. And the world is passing away along with its desires, but whoever does the will of God abides forever. Okay, so here we see that world is being defined here in sinful terms. All that is in the world. Well, is all that is in the world sin? Well, it depends on how you define world. But he's telling us what world here is. If we think of like worldliness, now we know we're not talking about righteousness. We're talking about those things that are unrighteous. So we have to understand world in those terms. So what does world mean here? World here means that which is sinful in the world. And those who follow along with those sinful desires and those the things that are listed, right? The desires of the eyes, the desires of the flesh, the pride of life. I'll make a comment here that some suggest that the three temptations of Jesus follow along the lines of these three realities. So they would say the desires of the flesh goes along with the first temptation, which is turning the stone into food. That's the desires of the flesh, they would say. And then the second one, all the kingdoms of the world, that's the desires of the eyes. See? And then the last one, the pride of life, is when he's taken to the pinnacle of the temple and he's said to throw himself down, and God will bear him up. That's common. If you even just Google search the temptations of Jesus, I think you're going to come across that from 1 John 2. I'm just not ultimately persuaded that that's intended here, because if we understand the heart of the matter of the temptations of Jesus, it seems nice to fit that in to that reality, except these are about internal desires that are sinful, the sinful desires of the flesh, the sinful desires of the eyes, the pride of life, which is sinful. Did Jesus have these things? No. But was he tempted to have these things? Well, ultimately, when we understand the temptations of Jesus the way that we see that it was his faith that was really being tested as the true Son of God himself. But anyway, what you see here is that the world is being defined as that which is sinful. And those who sin, those who are caught in that world of sin. So 1 John 3, 8 through 10, so we started in 1 John 5, right? The whole world lies in the power of the evil one. Now we're kind of backing up and we're moving forward again toward chapter 5. So we're in 1 John 3, verse 8. Whoever makes a practice of sinning is of the devil. The devil has been sinning from the beginning. The reason the Son of God appeared was to destroy the works of the devil. No one born of God makes a practice of sinning, for God's seed abides in him, and he cannot keep on sinning because he has been born of God. And by this it is evident who are the children of God and who are the children of the devil. Whoever does not practice righteousness is not of God, nor is the one who does not love his brother. Okay, so you just see there again, now we have the world, and now we have the devil, and now we know the whole world lies in the power of this evil one. Who or what lies in the power of the evil one? Well, those who are his children, clearly. Those who make a practice of sinning. And so what is it that actually lies in the power of the evil one? Is it the entire world and every single created thing? All of creation lies in the power of the evil one? Well, is that what John is communicating? I think it's the same thing Paul's communicating in 2 Timothy 2, 24 through 26. The Lord's servant must not be quarrelsome, but kind to everyone, able to teach, patiently enduring evil, correcting his opponents with gentleness. God may perhaps grant them repentance leading to a knowledge of the truth, and that they may come to their senses and escape the snare of the devil after being captured by him to do his will. And so there's a sense that unbelievers have been captured by Satan to do his will. That is, they are entrapped by him. They are part of his dominion, his domain, and he is the ruler of that domain, and they're trapped inside of that, and they are bound by him to do his will, right? And so the God of this world, the God of all that is evil and sinful and all the unbelievers that exist there within that world, right? And then finally, 2 Corinthians 4, 3 through 6, it says, "And even if our gospel is veiled, it is veiled to those who are perishing. In their case, the God of this world has blinded the minds of the unbelievers to keep them from seeing the light of the gospel of the glory of Christ, who is the image of God. For what we proclaim is not ourselves, but Jesus Christ as Lord, with ourselves as your servants for Jesus' sake. For God, who said, "Let light shine out of darkness," has shone in our hearts to give light of the knowledge of the glory of God in the face of Jesus Christ. And so there's where we see the transfer happen. So we have the God of this world, of what is meant by world here, and what is meant by he is the one who is in rule over all things. Right? The whole world lies in the power of this evil one. And what does he do? What lies in his power? Well, we have the unbelieving world and we have the believing world, and so much of the world is just under Satan's trap and snare, and they are held captive by him to do his will. They are in his charge. They are doing his bidding. And so I hope that helps to shape your understanding of what it means. It doesn't mean that Satan has been given all power and authority over all creation. Jesus is the one who has that. Right? But those who are in the world and of the world have been captured by him to do his will. And so you might think here, as we wrap up, you might think, and so how does someone escape? Right? How does someone get out of that? If you've been captured by Satan, powerful being, how do you get out? Well, that's when 2 Corinthians 4, it actually tells us, now you are in darkness. How do you move to light? It says, for God who said, "Let light shine out of darkness," has shone in our hearts to give light of the knowledge of the glory of God in the face of Jesus Christ. And so when the gospel comes into your life, it is God speaking light. Let there be light in that dark heart. And so you are transferred from the kingdom of darkness to the kingdom of his beloved Son.
Thank you for joining us on the Addendum podcast. For more information about Fellowship Renewed Church, visit frcsparta.com. Please join us for next week's episode.